Hey, counseling students, welcome to chapter 2. This is going to be a much shorter chapter. We are going to cover ethics and multicultural competence, stress and trauma, and building resilience. All right, we start off with awareness and knowledge. You're going to be able to develop an understanding of the basics of ethical counseling and therapy practice, which is very important. Examine your identity as a multicultural being, how dimensions of diversity and privilege may affect the session, and the central importance of multicultural competence. Become aware of the soul wound, trauma, and intergenerational trauma. You will be doing an exercise on this, and understand how neuroscience can guide our practice. With the skills and actions, you're going to have the ability to use the respectful model for encountering multicultural difference, ability to counsel beginning clients who experience microaggressions, ability to apply positive psychology and wellness as a basis for fostering and building client resilience, and ability to employ therapeutic lifestyle changes, or TLCs, as positive wellness strategies in the session for physical and mental health. You're going to gain a lot out of those two ideas there, the respectful model and then those TLCs. All right, ethics, our thoughtful professional list of do's and don'ts for our profession. So we need to obviously um, live by a code of ethics, and as you progress in this field, you will take an ethics course. So you'll take an entire semester on ethics where you will learn a lot about this field, and you'll learn that although something may be unethical, it may not be illegal, but anything illegal is unethical. So you're just going to learn a lot. I learned so much in my ethics class. It was amazing. Okay, so ethical codes can be summarized as do no harm to your clients, right? You've heard that before, to do no harm. Treat them responsibly with full awareness of the social responsibility of helping. Morals are individual principles by which we live that define our beliefs about right and wrong. All right, so the anticipated client response to professional ethics is you're going to build greater trust with your client, acknowledgement that personal actions do count, and examination of their own moral and ethical decisions. You're going to learn a lot about a client and their ethics, even by session 1. All right, so ethics and responsibility. So a summary: maintain confidentiality, recognize your limitations, remain in consultation with your professor, workshop leader, or mentor, be aware of individual and cultural differences, remember the golden and platinum rules, which we go over, give special attention to the ethical treatment of children and their rights. So with all of these bullets, remember in the first lecture, remain confidential. So anything that's said in that room is between the two of you. The only time you have to break confidentiality is if they are specifically saying they are going to harm themselves or harm someone else. Someone can think about it, but then that's your role to ask questions, get clarification. All right, know your limitations, know what you know and what you do not know. If there's something you need guidance on, seek out a mentor, seek out another professional, and ask someone, hey, I've got this case, this is going on, I kind of need some guidance with this. So, and if someone comes to you and it's too much for you to handle, that might be a case where you need to refer out. All right. Again, know your differences culturally, know those golden and platinum rules. And then, of course, children have rights, right? If a child tells you something in confidence, the worst thing you can do is tell their parents. Children do have rights. So it's important to remember that when it comes to mental health. All right, counseling and therapy are global phenomena, right? It's worldwide. Multicultural competence is imperative. Pay attention to cultural differences. Awareness of clients' multicultural backgrounds enables us to understand their uniqueness more fully. And the way that you learn about that is asking questions. If they say certain things and you're like, I don't know what that means, ask. People love talking about their background and their culture. Off usually. Sometimes they don't, but you'll learn to get those cues from your clients. Without awareness, we fail to establish good client relationships. Our field is a global force in psychological liberation. All right, so here's the dimensions influencing client behavior. You've got the individual, you've got relational, family, community, and then you have the contextual, which is society, period in world history. So of course they're separate entities, but then they also, go together. And then of course the whole global aspect. All right, let's look at the respectful model. So respectful interviewing and counseling enable us to discover the multiple voices our clients bring to us. What they mean by that is the voices they bring in are their own, other people, maybe family, maybe friends, co-workers, maybe thoughts they think or perceptions that are not really based in reality, but they're bringing a lot of stuff into that therapy session. The model enables us to identify the past and present voices that affect our own thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Identify what is meaningful in the way you think about yourself. Look at the list as a source of information about your own and your client's resilience, and watch for the possibility of cultural and historical trauma in each of the respectful dimensions. All right, so here's the breakdown of the model. You've got religion and spirituality, economic and class background, sexual identity, personal style and education, ethnic and racial identity, chronological lifespan status, trauma and crisis, family background and history, unique physical characteristics, and location of residence and language models. And this is just kind of this is the respectful cube. You can stop and look at it. I'm not going to go over all of this. All right, individualism and or community. Individualism and community are often treated as opposites, but they're not. They do work together. Of course, we have our own individuality, but we also have community, and our community does shape how we are as individuals, just as our individuality does shape our community. So we are members of multiple communities, many of which influence our life paths. Some may even become our main identities today. So if you really just kind of take yourself back to the different people in your lives and how they've shaped you, how that community has shaped you, you will start to see that, oh wow, I really do have a lot of different kind of communities within my individual self. So, what are your important communities, past and present? How have they affected your identity? Our fields have paid little attention to our communities and their meaning to us without considering their community and cultural, environmental, and contextual influences. You only know part of the person. So, it's really important as you are counseling to dive into all of those areas and ask questions based on what they're bringing into the session. All right, intergenerational transmission of trauma. So the trauma of severe abusive treatment can persist over generations, as we see it all the time in social media, news outlets, just people's personal accounts of stories. So it's important to be aware of this. Members exhibit increased depression and anxiety and suffer physical consequences. Each client that visits you has a long historical culture that is still carried within. We empower clients by building resilience and focusing on existing personal and family strengths. And a critical part of empowering clients is facilitating understanding of cultural pride, cultural health, and cultural identity. So maybe they're coming in and they are just in a really rough spot. We want to talk about things and ask them questions about, their heritage. What's something about your heritage that you really love? because they're going to come in sometimes thinking really negatively. And even if we can pull out just one thing that they can find that it's like, oh, I forgot about that. If we can do that one thing, then think about how many others we can unravel. And I know that because I live it, I breathe it, I see it all of the time. All right, privilege. Privilege is power given to people through cultural assumptions and stereotypes. Being in some respectful categories offers immediate privilege. Income inequality is now recognized as a central multicultural issue. An active teaching, consulting, coaching role is needed on the part of the counselor. So again, when you think of becoming a therapist, a counselor, whatever you call yourself, we are not just a person that just talks to another client. We have so many different hats that we wear. Sometimes we're consulting, sometimes we're in a coaching role and cheerleader, and sometimes we're doing some really deep work. And you know what? Some sessions are just light and breezy. So it just depends on what they bring in that day. We need to avoid stereotyping one group's cultural identity. Increasing awareness of societal privilege is also very much needed. All right, stress and trauma. This is something that our clients bring in all of the time. All right, stress is ubiquitous in our life experiences. It is a major and defining issue in counseling and therapy. Mental and physical health are declining due to inability to cope in healthy ways with stressors experienced. Current level of stress is higher than level reported in 2020. Consequences during the pandemic. Of course, I know this. I experienced it in my practice. Anxiety and depression was through the roof, and suicidal ideation intent, that was also very much exacerbated. So according to your text, though, feelings of anxiety, sadness, and anger, gaining weight, sleeping less, drinking more alcohol, additionally feeling overwhelmed and delaying or canceling health care services. Most affected groups: parents, essential workers, young people, indigenous, and people of color. All right, so now let's look at the soul wound, because you will be doing an assignment on that. So indigenous ideas about historical trauma involve the understanding that the trauma occurs in the soul or spirit. So we all carry soul wounds, and what those are different for, everyone. Many indigenous Americans over the generations were killed and moved to reservations. Now we focus a lot on that, but just know that everyone experiences that as well. The results: poverty, racism, poor medical attention, a shorter lifespan, loss of awareness of cultural heritage and spirituality over the centuries. The traumatic wound remains in the soul and appears in the body. The trauma continues. Indigenous Americans still experience continued racism and even denial of their existence by many governmental institutions. They have lower incomes and higher rates of alcoholism, abuse in families, suicide, and hopelessness. This is more what the text is talking about, is the indigenous Americans experience this at greater levels than other people. All right. The helping professionals and historical trauma. So professionals have often failed to see that the issues that clients bring to us are deeply involved with societal dysfunction, harassment, and oppression. Denial and lack of attention to historical trauma in the past are ever present. We see a lot on social media, or different people will say, that was in the past. Why are we bringing this in the present? Why do we still talk about this today? That's privilege, right? So when we think in that context, it's because we haven't experienced that. So it's really important, or maybe we have, but what I'm trying to get across is that these are things I hear from privileged clients. And so it's important to kind of bring in that history to help people understand. It's not so much about making people agree with it, it's just about an understanding. So that's kind of important for us as clinicians to know. All right, The multicultural movement showed that we need to become aware of external and historical causes of personal concerns. Psychological liberation from historical trauma occurs when clients discover that what they saw as a personal issue is not just their problem. Counselors can help clients begin to see the external and historical racism, sexism, heterosexism, or other forms of oppression are the underlying causes of many of their concerns. All right, so some important concepts to consider are microaggressions, advocacy, and racial battle fatigue. All right, so awareness of yourself as a cultural being is a vital beginning to authenticity. And I talked about that in chapter 1. I will have students that, will fill out their work and they will say, well, I'm not a cultural being. I have no culture. And that is simply untrue. It's maybe you're not in awareness of that, but we all are cultural beings. So be aware of your own assumptions, values, and biases. And everybody has a bias. We often think of biases as these really negative things, but if you really step back, we have a bias to something. We are not going to always go to that go-to. Some people think of a bias and they're like, oh, it's this. But there are things that, if you really just step back and think about it, try to think in your own mind, what is one thing you're biased to? Have you experienced cultural trauma and microaggressions? Maybe you haven't. Maybe in that context you haven't. And that's okay. That's something to be like, I'm glad, right? But again, we need to understand it. And if you have, how has this affected your sense of trust in others, both individuals and groups? So for that, go ahead and, visit that respectful model. All right, looking at the worldview, understand the worldview of the culturally different client. Worldview is the way you and your client understand the world. People from different backgrounds have vastly different philosophical views. Traditional approaches to counseling, theory, and skills may be inappropriate and or ineffective with some clients. And as I talked about in chapter 1, it is not cookie cutter. So what works with one client is maybe not going to work with another client. So you need to try and understand their worldview. All right. Helping your clients recognize their strengths and resources provides a basis for solving their issues, but do not deny their concerns. Whatever concern they bring in, validate that. It might be illogical, but validate whatever they are bringing in. Strengths will eventually be part of the solution. Assist them in naming the issue and identifying contextual factors. Provide tools to address the situation. Again, we're not giving them advice. We're not telling them what to do. So as a therapist, what you're not supposed to do is say, do this, do that, give suggestions, ask, hey, what do you think about this? But you want to give them the tools. And most of the time, they have none when they come in. Apply advocacy skills and institutional intervention skills. Use guidelines offered by the Multicultural and Social Justice Counseling Competencies. You'll learn about that. Use individual actions suggested by Sue et al. Sue is Daryl Wing Su. He is like the multicultural guru. When I was fortunate enough to meet him, he is very famous in the psychology world. I went to a psychotherapy convention in 2017 and met a lot of the big, giants in psychology like Dr. Philip Zimbardo, Dr. Elizabeth Loftus, Esther Perel, Irvin Yalom, a lot of people that you will know or learn to know, especially if you took like psych. It's basically the psychotherapy convention is all of those people that you have read about in textbooks. So if Freud was alive, he probably would have been at one. Carl Rogers attended those. Maslow, all of those, type of people would be at these conventions. So now they're, the ones that are living today. But anyway, so when I took my multiculturalism classes throughout my academia, the textbook that was written was by him. So that is who they are referring to here. All right, trauma effects in the brain. So again, every chapter we're going to bring in some of that neuroscience and neurobiology. The thinking center is underactivated in the prefrontal cortex when there is trauma experienced. Emotion regulation is underactivated in the anterior cingulate cortex. The fear center is overactivated. That is the amygdala. The consequences, difficulty in concentration and making decisions, also could be memory loss or forgetting really easily. Also may lead to lack of control and emotional outburst. The result of severe trauma may be the diagnosable disorder PTSD. Some people, there is kind of a branch called CPTSD that is actually not in the DSM as a diagnosable disorder. It is a condition of PTSD. CBT and trauma focused cognitive behavioral therapy. That is something that is very highly used to treat trauma, to work, with people with trauma. Micro counseling's listening skills are essential in CBT and virtually all methods, such as motivational interviewing and interpersonal therapy. It falls under that umbrella of CBT. All right, positive psychology aims to increase both resilience and optimism. And the father of positive psychology is Martin Seligman. He also, developed that concept of learned helplessness. So if you learn that in your general psychology class, he was also at the psychotherapy convention that I attended, and I was like so geeked out and excited to meet him and have him sign my book, and we talked, and it was amazing. So yeah, if you get into this field, you're going to learn so much about these people. All right, so optimism. Optimism is hope, confidence, and cheerfulness, trust in oneself, personal power, and belief in the future. Resilience, and you're going to hear that a lot through this course. That is the ability to bounce back from setbacks, temporary failure, and early or late trauma. Now, the only way to grow is through failure. So it's important to fail in life. It doesn't mean we're a failure when we fail at something. It's very yin yang, right? When we gain something, sometimes we have to fail in order to gain. And resilience is how do we bounce back from that? Some people have innate, they are resilient in nature, but also resilience can be taught. And often we have to teach our clients resiliency skills. All right, in recent years, the field of counseling has developed an extensive body of research and knowledge supporting the importance of positive psychology. We need stories of strength and success. Find something the client is doing right and discover their resources and supports. Engagement is more important than happiness in terms of life satisfaction. Remember what I said about happy. Happy is an emotion. So engagement is more important. So engaging, feeling confident, and feeling content in your life. All right, so advocacy, you can pause this and look at it. I will not, these are just the different elements. All right, so the TLCs: physical exercise, nutrition, weight, and supplements, social relationships, cognitive challenge, so thinking, right? Thoughts, sleep, meditation and relaxation, multicultural pride, and cultural identity. Drugs and alcohol. So some TLCs for stress management, additional important areas to consider: drugs and alcohol, medication and supplements, positive thinking, optimism, happiness, beliefs, values, and spirituality, nature breaks, not smoking, control screen time, art, music, dance, literature, relaxing and having fun, education, money and privilege, and social justice action. All right, so we reach, when you see key points in practice, we are on the last slide. So what did we go over in this chapter quickly? Ethics and the counseling and psychotherapy process, multicultural humility and social justice competencies, the respectful model, the soul wound and historical trauma, privilege as a multicultural interviewing issue, microaggressions, awareness, knowledge, skills, and action for multicultural competence, bias and prejudice wound clients' souls and affect their brains. Saying all that quick. Positive psychology, building client resilience, therapeutic lifestyle changes, specifics on which to build wellness for lifetime resilience, and then ending with your POCs and personal reflection. So, with that said, the book will dive in deeper, and when you're doing your reflective exercises, your personal reflections, and your POCs, you're going to dive into that more. This is just giving you a snapshot and just an awareness and idea of what these concepts are. So I did keep it under 30 as I promised I would from here on out. Maybe I'll go over once in a while, but I'll try to always keep it at right around 30 minutes. So hopefully you got something out of this, and whether you're watching this in the morning, afternoon, or evening, I hope you are having a wonderful time. And I will see you in chapter 3. All right, peace.